many times it's not even part of the discussion when problems are being considered where it really should be a key factor in the discussion, and it's just very discouraging that that's still the case here.
And from your perspective, you work with 9 Mile Run, how do you see these kinds of issues here on the ground here in Pennsylvania? What are the similarities that you see?
Well, I think that one of the key areas where climate change should be taken into account is when we're thinking about how to solve problems and challenges here in Western Pennsylvania, we need to be thinking more holistically and thinking smarter, because we don't have unlimited resources, and we are going to be facing challenges from climate change, including higher temperatures. So one of our big issues is green infrastructure. We're part of a campaign right now called the Clean Rivers Campaign that is focused on Alcosan, our sewer authority, and what the plan is going to be for how we're going to meet the consent decree. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but we are under a court order to stop the combined sewer overflows into the rivers. So we're at toward the end of a 5-year planning process, and in January of 2013, our sewer authority will be submitting a plan to the EPA for how we're going to solve that problem. And right now, the plan that's being developed is entirely gray infrastructure. It's primarily huge tunnels 100 feet under the river that will hold all of what's currently overflowing into the rivers until it can be treated at the plant. What's causing the sewers to overflow is excess stormwater. And through green infrastructure, we could prevent that stormwater from going into the system in the first place. That green infrastructure would also help us with our air quality problem, which the BREATHE project is trying to address. And when I think about how do problems impact women in the region, I mean, who's in the emergency room with their children when they're having an asthma attack? Primarily women. When I think about the cost of building the gray infrastructure, it's all going to be paid by ratepayers. So all of our water and sewer bills are going to be going up to pay for this fix. And whether we build green infrastructure or gray infrastructure, there's going to be a cost involved. That's going to disproportionately impact poor people. Poor families are disproportionately single-parent families, mostly headed by women. That's going to happen. The cost is going to happen regardless of which direction we go, because it is a court order. We do have to fix the problem. But let's make sure that we get the most benefit for our communities by the method that we choose to address the problem. If we build giant tunnels under the river, that's all we have at the end of it is giant tunnels under the river. If we choose green infrastructure, we've increased property values, revitalized business districts, helped solve our air quality problem, lowered the urban heat island effect to make our community more resilient in the face of climate change. We've gotten all of these other benefits for our money, so that's how I think about needing to think smarter and more holistically.
Post-film thoughts?
I thought just this film was a great demonstration of how the experiences of women, whether we live here in the United States, whether we live here in Pittsburgh, or halfway around the world, are the same. We have to look at an approach that is intersectional. So we see that the choices for women globally to decide to have children or not have children is directly related to the economy and to the environment in which they live. And so I think that when we make policies locally, at the state level, especially around Marcellus shale drilling, but also across this country, it affects what happens around the world. Can you imagine trying to maintain your reproductive health with limited water? Can you imagine that? And so for us, we have to, again, put it in perspective that what we fight for here, it directly affects what happens to women around the world. And I think that in our work for reproductive justice, it's the idea that, women get to control their choices about their bodies, about their sexuality, about their work, their reproduction, and their gender. And so in our work, we connect these things to the environment. The way we treat the environment is the way we treat women, and the way we treat women is the way we treat the environment. So that's really caught up in our work to develop women leaders, particularly young women of color, to be voices and to show those connections and work at these intersections, which is where most of the battles are lost. We find that so many issues happen based on identity, especially around socioeconomic status, where you live in the world, and what access you have to resources. So very much so, we have to have an intersectional approach in how we think about these issues around environmental health and reproductive health, but also environmental justice and reproductive justice.
So I'm going to get back to some of the more local issues and some questions around some of the pressing legislation, especially here in the state. But I wondered, Suzanne, if you can now, we're post-film, maybe share with us how can women here in the U.S. become more engaged as activists and advocates to support both global aid and global family planning aid and policies. If you know of specific policies or initiatives at the federal level that you think we need to have our voices heard and should be speaking to our legislators about or the administration about, maybe you can speak to those things for all of us. That would be great.
Well, there's two really easy ones. And the first, in this sort of moment of such global economic uncertainty and sort of a super committee that didn't really deliver very super results and, kind of budget crises happening every which way, it seems to me that the stuff that falls in the firing line is actually the stuff that gets the least money to begin with and actually will have the least amount of impact on solving the big problems. By this I mean foreign assistance. The whole degree to which the U.S. is engaged in the world in development and leadership and diplomacy, and that's always on the chopping block first, even though, people think that we give 25% of our budget to foreign assistance when it's, barely 1%, and that's actually only if you include all the other, sort of strategic kind of state support. So that's sort of the first, is just sort of making known that we really believe in U.S. global leadership, that it matters that we're out in the world, not just in a defense context, but in a diplomatic context and a development context, and how much the United States has helped birth around the world and catalyze in terms of ideas and solutions and partnerships. It's really, it's phenomenal if you sort of start to scratch that surface a little bit. So that would be first. And I guess part of that is sort of, because the women's health component is always the one that's easily forgotten. So when foreign assistance generally is faring not well, you can rest assured that we're faring even less well when it comes to women's health. So sending that message is also important. And part of what, part of the reason that we're in a place like Pittsburgh, obviously having a partnership with Heather, but we did an event also like this in Miami. We did an event like this in Minneapolis. I'm hoping to do one in San Antonio when I'm home for the holidays in a few weeks, is to remind elected officials that when they operate at the international level, you care. I mean, you're interested in them solving Western Pennsylvania issues, and you're interested in them solving Pennsylvania issues and national issues. But when they're leaders on the global stage, they need to be congratulated for it, because there's not a lot of senators and members of Congress who get that feedback. They don't have global constituents. A woman in Nepal is not going to call Senator Casey and say, hey, thanks for that vote on international family planning, but you will, and say, Senator Casey, your stance on this issue is key to me. I care about the global world. I care about the U.S. role in that. So it's sort of holding the line on foreign assistance. It's not going to solve our budget problems, so don't chop it. And women's health within that is really worth protecting. And then
first of all, I think that we tend to take water for granted here because we have so much of it. And if anything, maybe we wish we had less of it with all of the severe rain events that we've had and the flooding that we had this year. And I just do want to point out, by the way, that those severe rain events that we had more of this year are not a weird anomaly. They are a function of climate change. Warmer air holds more water, and when it lets go of it lets go of it in larger, more dramatic events, and so that's going to continue to happen, and we have to adjust and recognize that we need to expect that to continue. However, because we do get a reliable 39 or 40 inches of rain a year, every year, I think over the next, few decades, that's something that's actually going to draw people to this region as other parts of the country become drier and drier. So it could be a key foundational asset for our region in this century, and we need to value it more and take it more seriously. And certainly the shale industry is a serious threat to that, and one that we need to take seriously. And the whole issue right now with bromides in the water and how that interacts with the chemicals that are used to purify our water at the water treatment plant is something that's only gotten a little bit of publicity. I don't know how aware people are of it, but it's a serious concern. So I would say people really should try to get involved in paying attention to that. Some of the organizations like Penn Future and Penn Environment that are statewide organizations have a lot of information available on their websites and are doing statewide campaigns on the issue to try to get the legislature to pay more attention to that. Our organization is not directly involved in that. It's not something that's happening, in our watershed or in the city specifically, but it is.
Right.
But it's very much so in the watershed of the Allegheny and Monongahela and Ohio rivers, and all of our communities draw our drinking water from those rivers, so it's very important.
So Suzanne and I and a few others had dinner last night, and we were joined for part of it with a staff member from Senator Casey's office, and we were discussing, as Suzanne said, we think it's important for all of us to speak to our legislators around what we want them to support, and we also need to applaud when they're doing really good things. And certainly Senator Casey has been a supporter of global aid, and also we were especially proud that he really came to the defense of family planning both internationally and nationally in the last legislative cycle, and I think it was a politically courageous move. One of the other pieces for so something for all of you to know, because that is of course the purpose of these breakfasts, is one, if you run into the senator, or if you have a moment to send a letter or email, it's really great to be able to say thank you, right? Thank you for supporting these issues that are very important, national and international family planning. And also he has recently, in this last year, also introduced a bill around the disclosure of what is in fracking fluid, right? And that bill has not come up for vote yet, and so that's something for all of us to know about, and communicate with his office about, and find out how we can help support that. One of the things that Senator Casey has not signed on yet to support, that many of us here have been involved in, is the Toxic and Safe Chemicals Act. And Women for a Healthy Environment has really been one of the lead organizations in our community doing advocacy around this. And that would be a federal bill, that would mandate more investigation, research, and regulation around all of these chemicals. So I want to give some folks in the audience in a little bit a chance to share with us issues they're involved with, but I wanted you all to know that is a federal issue. And then thinking about here at the state, I just said how Senator Casey has really helped continued support for family planning nationally when it's come under attack at the federal level. We've seen a lot happening here at the state, and I wondered, Latasha, if you could speak to two bills that are still under consideration by our state legislature. Next week is their last week in session. They basically have 6 more sessions
732. Over the last year, a coalition of women's and reproductive health rights and justice organizations have organized across the state, primarily through Pennsylvanians for Choice, to prevent passage of this bill called the Healthy Facilities Act. This bill comes out of a tragedy that happened in Philadelphia with the Dr. Gosnell, who was
Not licensed.
not a non-licensed abortion provider and jeopardized and took the lives of women and babies in Philadelphia, in the park, actually the neighborhood where I grew up in West Philadelphia. And so out of that, the legislature, which is vastly unsupportive of reproductive rights, health, or justice, took it upon themselves to try to prevent this from happening again under the subterfuge of this happening again by creating additional regulations for freestanding abortion facilities across the state. And so really the goal is to restrict access to abortion in this state and to close down freestanding abortion clinics. But it would create, it's called ambulatory surgical facilities regulations. So if you had any type of outpatient surgery, a freestanding abortion clinic would have to upgrade their facilities to match that. So for example, you would have to have an elevator that could hold up to 3,000 pounds, or you would have to have a certain type of ventilation system. None of these, or a certain size room to provide the procedure. None of those things are proven to affect the quality of care in providing abortions. And so we started a campaign called We've Had Enough, where we organized the hell out of women to go to the state capitol in September. In the rotunda, there were over 500 people across cultures, race, multi-generational, just an amazing day for women in this state to say we've had enough of the cultural and the legislative attacks on us. And so we were able to fend off the bill earlier this year. We had the summer to organize. We came back. We did. And so now this is our last opportunity to take Senate Bill 732 down for the count. Because what would happen is most freestanding abortion clinics would go out of business. They would close. We already have only 20% of our counties have abortion providers currently. So, you know, if you're living in Western Pennsylvania, you would have to leave this state to get an abortion. And so what's important to understand is that it is about restricting access to abortion. Those who are opponents of abortion will do all that they can to make sure that our access is limited. And so for New Voices Pittsburgh, it's important that the voices of women of color and young women were speaking to elected officials, both from this side of the state, but really from southeastern Pennsylvania, where a large portion of the women are represented, as well as people of color. And as a result, we've been able to create a statewide advocacy formation that really is looking at the policies affecting women of color across the state. So down with Senate Bill 732. You can go to we'vehadenough.pa.org. But when you get your alerts from organizations like Planned Parenthood and Women and Girls Foundation and New Voices Pittsburgh, we encourage you to actually call your senators because that's where this fight is right now. And so we really want to defeat it resoundingly. That the way it was described to me by elected officials, they hadn't seen that type of organizing around any kind of reproductive rights bill in a very long time, if at all. So that was a very proud day for the coalition statewide and locally.
And it's such Sue Fritchie from Women's Law Project and I, we at Women and Girls Foundation were first learning about this bill months ago, we were saying it's so hard because it sounds like a good thing. Like, why wouldn't you want to regulate health So this was an unlicensed practitioner in an unregulated facility
Right.
doing horrific acts. So that's what we want to see less of. And none of us, I mean, I think, so we all have the same goal, right? We want to see less of that. But what's so scary is that right now, women's reproductive freedom is the law, and there are legal, safe places that are heavily regulated for women to go and have services. And if this bill passes, it will actually close all of those places. And the only places women could go would be places like Brisnell's. That's, for me, what's so scary about it. And that's why it is really important for all of you to contact your state legislators, because on the day of the rally, we went to the rally, but I also met with my senator, Senator Pippy, who is in support of this bill. And he's a great dad of amazing daughters, and his wife's fantastic. And, and we tried to have a conversation around, you care deeply about women's health, and I care deeply about women's health. And this bill's not going to get us to that joint goal. There are good bills, but this one's just not one of those that's going to get us to that place. And of course, also, most of these clinics provide other services as well. So you aren't just taking one service away, you're also now taking pap smears away from rural women. You're also taking, cancer screenings and OBGYN care and contraception and all of these things. So, this isn't the path to prevent the horrors of what happened. The governor of the state actually, we all thought, made a very reasonable response after the events in Philadelphia, because what he said was, this was a horrific event, and we have regulations in place that should have prevented this, and departments who weren't doing their jobs. And he's right. So the laws are on the books that could have prevented Brisnell. So it's a really complicated issue, and we know that it's sort of it's not so sexy to be talking about an elevator bill, but the reality of what the elevator bill does is really pretty scary. So that's SB 732, and then Kim, I want you to take a moment to talk about HB 1977 as
Okay.
well.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, just to add
Stand
to,
up and introduce yourself.
hi, I'm Kim Everett. I'm the CEO of Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania with a name tag that's been all over the floor. Yeah, just to add to what you said about 732, we really don't have the votes in the House or the Senate to defeat this. We're in a really bad place, and I've been with Planned Parenthood for about 30 years now, and this is probably the worst piece of legislation I've seen, the most devastating for us. We would not be able to provide abortion services in our current facility. We would need to move, get basically a little hospital clinic that's very expensive, lots of regulations around staffing and so on, but we would need to be a mini hospital. And this will put every abortion provider out of business until they could reorganize and become an ambulatory surgical center. Our best hope right now is to keep this bill from coming to a vote. And we've been successful since June. There was a little bit of activity in June, and now it's picking up again. We don't have the votes. Even our supportive legislators are very afraid to vote pro-choice or to vote for anything that would protect women's health. So if you have any connections with the governor, any particularly Republican but even Democratic legislators, we need to put the pressure on them to